As World War II raged on the battlefields of Europe, death was always right around the corner for those inside the concentration camps.
I guess if you want to live, the survival, the instinct of survival, you forget about everything, about pains, about everything. An empty train arrived to pick up the mountains of the clothing. There were clothing mountains. It hit me. You become like an animal. You forget about everything. The brain is such a wonderful machine. It cuts out everything. You don't think about everything. You just I was thinking only how to get out of this cage, like an animal.
You had to look out for yourself. You couldn't worry about other people. You couldn't, you had to save your life, that's all. You had to get out as fast as you could.
Fortunately for Kleeman, in 1938, before all German borders were closed, a cousin in Nebraska sent an affidavit on his behalf and he was allowed to leave Dachau for the U.S. Weinstein didn't have it quite so easy. He escaped from Treblinka death camp in a train hauling off the clothing of the dead and was in hiding until just before liberation.
And we stayed there 17.5 months in the fish hatchery. We made a hole here, a grave. You see this? We made a pit. We used to stay there during the day. Right away, when the sun was coming out, started to come out, we were inside.
Those who managed to escape the war early on didn't rest easy, however. Many were drafted or volunteered for armed service in their adopted countries.
I was already handpicked to land on D-Day in Normandy. And I was lucky. I lived through most of everything. A heavy bombardment on July 25th nearly killed me. It killed my hearing completely. That bombardment opened up Normandy, that Patton could take his tanks and ride across France with them. That's when the war started moving.
I saw a lot of terrible things. We were called out at 4 o'clock in the morning at the not far from the front entrance of Buckingham Palace was Victoria Station, and there was they bombed the troop transport. So all we collected was arms and legs and heads, and that was terrible.
In the Army, I saw lots of hand-to-hand combat. I saw a lot of dead Germans, a lot of dead Americans. I made a stop in Dachau where full of bodies, full of the living dead.
I had rounded up by the Germans the people who participated in Kristallnacht in my hometown. We found 11 people that they rounded up and put them into the same jail I was put in 1938. One man, I didn't tell him to because I rounded him up myself. The guy who arrested me, I went out with my jeep and my gun and picked him up and put him into the jail. He couldn't believe it, but he had no choice.
Weinstein, who proudly went on to join the Polish army and participate in Germany's defeat, had run-ins with death right up to the end.
A day before liberation, we got out of the forest to hide because the Germans put tanks here. The Russians were closing in. And so to put a line of defense, my father and I and my friend Bill Goldberg got out. And we were on the road over there somewhere, and they saw us the next day, the Germans, the military, and they chased us, and they caught my friend, and they killed him. And me and my father, they couldn't find. It's miracles. You have no...
When the Nuremberg trials began in November of 1945, 11 million people, 6 million of whom were Jews, were dead, and millions more were eternally scarred and scattered across the world.
So by the time I came to Nuremberg, I was a pretty tough cookie. And, you know, it's like the first kiss. There's nothing like the first kiss. First time you see a dead person, it's a terrible shock. But by the time you see it for the 100th time, you know, it's still a shock, but not like the first time. And the same was true for these defendants. I mean, when I talked to them and found out what part they'd played in the war, I talked to the first one and found out he'd organized concentration camps, built gas chambers and incinerators. It was a real shock. I mean, you ask yourself, how could any human being do this? But by the time you talk to the 10th, that's what you expected.
But no courtroom could repair the damage that had been done.
My mother had written to me that they were going to Chile. Okay? So I knew they got out. I knew nothing about my grandmother, her siblings, or any of the other relatives. That was a terrible part. For years and years and years you wondered.